We've all heard the story of Medusa, and if you knew anything about her, you knew one thing above all else. You did not look at her face. The stories described her in pieces, the way people describe something too terrible to hold all at once. Skin like cold stone, hair that moved without wind, each strand a living serpent, tasting the air, watching for what the eyes hadn't found yet. And then the eyes. One look and you were stone, frozen there permanently, a monument to the mistake of looking. Her victims surrounded her like a museum, figures caught in postures of shock or of running, figures reaching for weapons they never got to use. All of them certain right up until the moment that they weren't, that they would be the one to finally end her. She was a monster. That was the whole of it. That was until Perseus. He came with a mission and the right equipment, a mirrored shield, which was a gift from Athena, the goddess of wisdom, patron to the heroes. The trick was the reflection. Look at her directly, and you'd die. Her image in polished bronze, that you could survive, that you could use. He found her sleeping. The snakes, for once, were still. He stood over her, eyes locked on his shield, watching her face in reverse. And then he swung. The head came clean off. He held it up, this thing that had turned so many to stone, and instead of destroying it, he kept it. He put it in a bag and carried it with him, because the gaze didn't stop working just because she was dead. Medusa, even decapitated, was still useful. That was the story. The monster, the hero, the ending that everyone expected. It was clean and satisfying. But that's just one version. And it might have left out a few pieces. I'm Tara Peralt, and you're listening to Psychology of the Strange, part of the Darkcast Network. Welcome to the dark side. Before Medusa was a monster, she was just a woman. She was something rare and dangerous in the ancient world. She was beautiful. Extraordinarily, inconveniently beautiful. The kind of beautiful that made her a subject of conversation in places she'd never been, among people she'd never met. Poets wrote about her hair specifically. Dark, lustrous, the kind of hair that became its own legend before the rest of her story had even started. That beauty wasn't incidental, it was just the first domino. Poseidon noticed her, god of the sea, brother of Zeus, one of the most powerful beings in the Greek pantheon. And he wanted her. So he took her. In Athena's temple of all places, a sacred space, a place of worship, a place that was supposed to mean something. He assaulted her there, on the temple floor, and then he left. Without consequence, without pause, already thinking about something else. But Medusa couldn't leave. She was still there, in the wreckage of what had just happened to her, in a temple that no longer felt sacred, in a body that no longer felt like hers. And that's when Athena arrived. And here's where the story gets unbearable, because Athena was not a passive goddess. She was wisdom and strategy and justice. She was also a woman, which in Greek mythology meant she understood, at least on some level, what it was to navigate a world built around male power. She saw what had happened in her temple, and she understood who had done it. But then she punished Medusa. Not Poseidon, Medusa. The hair that poets admired became snakes. The face that had drawn unwanted attention became a weapon. The beauty that had made her a target was transformed into something that would keep everyone away. Athena's temple had been desecrated. Medusa's existence, as she was, had become inconvenient. So Athena solved the inconvenience. What happened next is the part we already know. Perseus, the shield, the sleeping Gorgon, the clean swing of a blade. But hold the sequence for a moment. She was assaulted. She was punished for being assaulted. She was hunted for what the punishment made her. And when she was finally killed, her head, her face, the sight of everything that had been done to her and everything that had been taken from her was carried away as a trophy, a weapon, a tool in someone else's story. Perseus didn't destroy Medusa's power. He extracted it. He reappropriated the same thing that had been hers, even if it was forced upon her, and put it to work for his own ends. The gaze that had been her only defense became his most effective weapon. She was more useful to the hero dead than she had ever been allowed to be alive. That is the version that Ovid wrote. That's the version that got quietly set aside in favor of the one we all grew up hearing. This story isn't just about mythology. It's about the specific shape of what happened to Medusa, the sequence and the logic of it. It's a pattern, and patterns don't always stay in the ancient world. They travel, they adapt, they show up in legal codes and courtrooms and family silences, and in 2026 on social media. The pattern works like this. A woman's body becomes the site of some deep transgression. Through her beauty, through her desirability, through the simple fact of existing in a way that attracts male attention or male conflict. Something happens to her, usually something done by a man with more power than she has. And then the consequence lands on her. Not on the man who acted, on her, because she's the visible problem. The powerful man is untouchable, or maybe just inconvenient to touch, or simply not considered relevant to the cleanup operation. Think about what Medusa actually is after the transformation. She can't be approached, she can't be seen. Anyone who gets close enough to look at her directly gets stopped cold, frozen permanently and in stone. We read that as a weapon, but there's another way to read it entirely. When someone experiences assault and the institution meant to protect them responds by making them the problem, the literature in psychology of trauma is pretty clear about what happens next. The rage has nowhere to go. The shame has nowhere to go. The body holds it, and it radiates. The petrifying gaze isn't a monster's power. It's what unprocessed trauma looks like when it's been given a mythological form. She doesn't turn people to stone because she's evil. She turns people to stone because she was never allowed to be anything else. It's the freeze response externalized, a wound that keeps everyone at exactly the distance required to never be touched again. And the snakes? Before any of this happened, the poets wrote about her hair. Her hair was the first thing anyone mentioned when they described her. Athena didn't just disfigure it. She took the most remarked upon, most admired part of her and colonized it entirely, turned it into something that watches, that warns, that never sleeps even when the rest of her body does. The snakes are always alert, always scanning, always tasting the air for the next threat. That is a body that has learned it cannot afford to rest. That safety is not a thing available to it. If you have ever known someone who can't stop scanning a room for exits, who startles at sounds other people don't register, who can't fully settle, you know what Athena built. Now, Athena is the part of the story that doesn't get examined enough, because Poseidon is the obvious villain, and obvious villains let everyone else off the hook. Poseidon is just a predator. There have always been predators. What makes this story structurally significant is Athena, the goddess of wisdom, the female authority, the protector. And she arrives at the scene of what happened in her temple, and calculating that the institutional damage mattered more than the woman still standing in it. This is a specific kind of compounding harm that occurs not just from the original trauma, but from the moment the institution that should have protected you reveals that your pain is less important than its reputation. Athena didn't protect Medusa, she managed her. There's a difference, and the body knows it. This isn't just ancient history. This is universities declining to expel perpetrators because of liability concerns. This is police departments misclassifying assault reports to keep their statistics clean. This is every institution that has ever looked at a woman in pain and quietly calculated what the pain was going to cost before deciding how to respond. Athena had better PR. After Medusa's death, after Perseus takes the head and carries it away as a weapon and uses it to defeat every enemy standing between him and the rest of his story, Athena takes it back. She mounts it on her own shield, the Aegis. The woman who was punished for being in Athena's temple ends up on Athena, permanently. Decorative, useful in exactly the way the institution needed her to be useful, which was silent and contained and available for deployment. Alive, Medusa was a problem to be managed. Dead, she was a resource to be used. She was more valuable to the structure after her death than she was ever permitted to be during her life. Perseus didn't destroy her power. He reappropriated the one thing that had been hers and put it to work. And the version of the story that survived, the one we grew up with, is the villain version, the monster version. It was more convenient. The other versions require answering some uncomfortable questions about who the real architects of her story were. It's easier to hand someone a mirrored shield and call it heroism. And I can't help but mention Freud here, because Sigmund Freud looked at this story of a woman assaulted, punished, hunted, and beheaded, and the most interesting thing he found in it was that her severed head symbolized male anxiety, castration anxiety specifically, and he wrote an entire essay about it, of a woman's decapitation. Honestly, the only surprising part of this is he didn't find some way to work in issues of suppressed feelings for his mother. But that 2-page fever dream tells us something beyond the obvious fact that Freud had his own material to work through. Even the scholarly frameworks built to understand this story couldn't stop centering on the male experience. Centuries of interpretation and the questions that kept rising to the top was not what happened to her, but what does she mean to him? The pattern doesn't just live in myths and legal codes. It lives in everything on how we've chosen to think. So let's leave the ancient world entirely for a moment and talk about something that's still going on today. In Iran in 2024, there were at least 186 documented honor killings recorded in a single year. More than one woman killed every 2 days. And those are only the documented cases, the ones that didn't get quietly filed as suicides, accidents, or family disputes, which is the preferred bureaucratic language for something that is none of those things. Under Article 630 of Iran's Penal Code, a husband who kills his wife under specific circumstances faces no punishment. Fathers who kill their children are shielded from retributive justice entirely. The institution looked at the pattern and decided to protect it. Athena, again, different building, same decision. In Pakistan in October 2024, a man murdered 4 women in his family, including his own mother. Because they had posted TikTok videos he felt spread immodesty and damaged the family's reputation. He told police exactly that. The Human Rights Commission of Pakistan documented 405 honor killings that year, up from the 226 the year before. Experts note the actual number is almost certainly higher. Many of these deaths are never reported at all, absorbed quietly into the category of things families don't discuss with authorities. In Iran, in a village near Abadan, a 17-year-old girl was shot dead by her father because she had a relationship with a boy from a rival tribe. She ran to a neighbor's house when she understood what was coming. Her father tracked her down, brought her home, and shot her in front of her mother. The local police commander described it officially as a family dispute. And then there's Rahaf. In Syria, on the 6th of April of 2025, a video circulated on social media showing a man shooting his sister as she pleaded for her life. Her name was Rahaf Alwan. Rahaf was the second woman from her family killed within days. Her sister, Maha, had already been murdered by their father. Both girls had been kidnapped by a drug trafficking gang, used as leverage in a dispute over drugs between the gang and their brother. The family received threats that the girls would be raped. A witness confirmed the family knew about the kidnapping, knew about the threats, knew what was being done to their daughters and sisters while it was happening. When the girls came home, they came home contaminated. They had been touched by the wrong story, proximate to violation, possibly subjected to it. And that proximity was enough. The brother filmed Rahaf's murder himself, posted it online deliberately, a public demonstration. It was a declaration that the family's honor had been addressed, and the evidence was available for anyone who wanted to verify it. No investigation was opened. No arrest was made. Despite the video, despite the audio, despite the fact that the crime was committed, in the words of the witness, in plain sight. Rahaf pleaded for her life on camera, and her brother did not hesitate, and the authorities looked away, and the neighborhood already knew, and none of it was hidden, and none of it was punished. That's the Medusa story, not as a metaphor, but as current events. The girls were taken because of their brother's actions, because of his disputes and his debts and his problems. Then, their bodies were used as instruments of male conflict before anyone had decided what to do with them afterwards. When the threat touched them, they became the contamination, the thing that carried the damage, the thing that had to be resolved. Perseus didn't invent anything. He inherited a logic that was already ancient when Ovid wrote it down, and that logic has been faithfully maintained ever since, in courtrooms and legal codes and family silences, and villages where everyone knows and no one speaks, and the authorities file it under dispute and move on. The woman's body as the site of transgression, her existence as the problem to be managed, her pain as less important than the reputation of the institution, the family, the man, the story. Medusa never got to tell her version, and neither did Rahaf. So I started with a monster, and it's easier that way, to start with the monster, to give her snakes for hair, and a gaze that kills, to send a hero with a mirrored shield and call the ending clean. The threat neutralized, the hero walking away with proof of what he's done. What's harder is asking who decided she was the monster, what she looked like before the punishment, what she was trying to say when the only protection she had left was a gaze that kept everyone at a safe distance. What's harder is looking directly at the thing in the mirror. Stories are never just stories. They're just the first draft of the rules. This episode is a lot darker than some of the places we've gone before, because it touches on something that's still very current in a way that folklore or mythology only hints at. And I want to thank you for taking the time today to listen and hold space for those that are still dealing with circumstances like these. And if this landed close to home, I see you, and I won't look away. Until next time, you can find me across social media at PsychStrangePod. Stay curious and stay strange.